Hello, everyone. Welcome to our STORK talk on publishing an open access book, which may or may not be a textbook. The goal of today is to walk through the process of publishing a book in an open access format, how STORK can support you. We'll discuss that. And we'll just discuss a little bit of the process for the open access book that was recently published, which is Essentials of Exercise and Sport Psychology, an open access textbook co-edited by Dr. Leighton Jones. So shout out to Dr. Leighton Jones for all of his help throughout the whole process. It couldn't have been done without him, certainly. Dr. Aaron Caldwell, the STORK Publications Chair, who is providing support throughout the whole process as well. The more than 70 contributors of the book, obviously it could not have been done without each of them, and STORK itself for supporting this goal and this idea. So the overall goal was not only to create one open access book for students enrolled in sport and exercise psychology classes, but to show that it can be done and eventually, hopefully, have an entire open access curriculum where every student in every class is able to have a high quality open access option. So for exercise physiology, biomechanics, motor control, sport nutrition, whatever it might be. Hopefully this talk today inspires you or your colleagues to get started and reach out to STORK to tell us how we can support you. So why publish an open access text, whether it's a textbook or not a textbook? Obviously, greater accessibility is key. The platform that we use allows for dynamic updating. So when you print a book in a hard copy or paper format, not in an electronic format, it's printed. Once it's off the press, it's done. You can't edit it. You can't do anything with it until the next edition, unless you recall all the books. And obviously that's an expensive and difficult process, and it's rarely done. So the platform we use allows you to edit your content, make revisions, small or major, at essentially no cost. And then it's obviously very feasible too. So I think many times people are unaware of the book or textbook publishing process, and it seems like it's in a black box and it depends on the different publishers and your contracts with them. Here we're going to see how easy it is for people to do it. And I am not particularly knowledgeable, or was not particularly knowledgeable in this area, but if I, with the support of some others, was able to do this successfully, I think you can too. So the process for you would be to choose a topic, and if it's related to kinesiology or sport and exercise science, likely STORK will be interested in helping to support that. Then you will find co-editors or contributors. So you might not have an edited volume, and that's fine. You might just write a book yourself. So that might not be applicable. So if it's not, you would write the whole book yourself. Finding a co-editor and contributor in the case of this textbook made it feasible, but some textbooks are clearly not edited, and that's really up to the authors or editors. And then partnering with STORK. So communications with STORK and primarily the publications chair should be done very early in the process. So you can come to some level of agreement and discuss the types of support that would be needed and whether or not STORK can provide any financial support on top of the technical support and guidance. So you want to communicate early and often about this process. And I'm just going to walk through the process of our book, but of course, if I miss anything, I hope Dr. Aaron Caldwell, who is also on the call, jumps in and can provide some additional context or corrections. So for the textbook that we just published, the first step was finding a co-editor, Dr. Leighton Jones in this case, and getting the blessing from STORK. And STORK was very supportive of it from the beginning. And it was, again, really a proof of concept process here. Then we decided on the format, an edited book, and the style guidelines as well. So we chose potential topics that would be of interest that we wanted to see covered. We chose APA format. And once we did that, we sent invitations to potential contributors. We got a tentative agreement, eventually more permanent agreement. And of course, some people declined, some people changed their minds later, and that's a normal part of the process. And of course, with the goal timelines, sometimes we didn't meet those initial goal timelines, but that's okay. There's some flexibility built in here, and that's just a normal part of the process. None of this is unique to publishing with STORK so far. We received drafts, provided feedback, received revisions after our initial feedback. Then we start to do proofing and typesetting. Eventually, we obtained final approvals of what the published version would look like. And then we went through the publication process itself. So how can STORK be of use, and how can STORK support other authors or editors in their mission to publish an open access text? STORK is a member of Crossref, which allows us to have digital object identifiers quite easily and link them to chapters or whole books, which allows for easier and more accurate citation and referencing and a more permanent record as well. We can use the publication platform that STORK has adopted for books, which is very similar to our platform that we use to publish journals. We can assist with the process of obtaining an ISBN number, which is necessary if you want to call your book a book in many locations. Otherwise, it's sort of a collection of articles in a way. We could assist with the process of creating a cover, although we'll talk about that as well, because for this initial textbook, STORK did not participate in the cover process, but now that we know how to do it, we can support other authors. Maybe provide assistance with licensing and copyright issues. Sometimes this occurs at a much higher cost than the cover, the ISBN, or the digital object identifier. So this would need to be agreed upon in advance. And maybe some type of budget would be required for each book, probably a case-by-case basis. We don't expect to have 100 books in our catalog, so cost would be more feasible, but we'll talk about the total cost of our book in just a few moments, and possibly assisting with the typesetting process. So for our book, we did this manually, but this doesn't necessarily need to happen manually. There are some tools available to make this a more automated process and a more consistent process as well. So as mentioned, we are a member of Crossref, which allows us to have digital object identifiers. So all of our articles have digital object identifiers. All of our preprints have digital object identifiers. And for the book itself and each individual chapter has a digital object identifier. And personally, I think that's really important to allow each author to get referenced more accurately as well. The publishing platform is called Open Monograph Press, and you can Google Open Monograph Press and see documentation about it. You can also look at the link below to see what it's all about. And of course, you can use our book to see an example of what a published version looks like. What's really cool about this platform is all submission process, from initial drafts to revisions to typeset and copy edited versions, can be handled on the platform itself. This includes communication to authors about revisions, things that are needed, etc. Or you could do what we did and basically manually communicate with authors via email, save important email documentation such as final approvals, but have basically 1 or 2 people go and actually finalize the book at the last step on the platform. Probably I recommend now, after going through it, to do it all on the platform from the beginning. And now STORK is able to help do that, but that's not required. It's really an option. And again, as I mentioned, the platform allows for versioning and dynamic updating. So here is the homepage of our platform, and you see 1 book in the catalog. Hopefully we will add more. Hopefully there's some exercise physiologist or biomechanist watching who wants to publish a book, and you'll reach out to make this page more populated. And when you click on the book itself, and you see links below, you see the main book, and you can download as a PDF. You see a synopsis, you see editors, you see some licensing information on the website as well, with the exception of a table and a figure and the cover artwork. We have a book that is under a Creative Commons license, which is recommended and most likely will be required. What's really cool about this platform is that it allows you to track number of downloads. So between all of the chapters and the book itself, in just over a month, there's been about 7,000 downloads, which we're really proud of. And it just illustrates the point that if you build it, they will come. If you publish it, people will read it, right? Clearly there's a interest in this, okay? And what's also really neat about the publishing platform is it allows every individual book to get downloaded individually. So let's imagine you have a book of 20 chapters, but in a 16-week semester, you might only be able to cover 16 core chapters and the rest might be supplemental. In your syllabus, it's very feasible to have a link to each chapter individually that you use, and maybe not in the order that the chapters are presented in the textbook. So there's a lot of flexibility there. And of course, with each chapter having its own link, this allows each chapter to have its own digital object identifier. Here's the back end of the publishing platform. So when you are going through this process, if you're going through the process, or if someone from STORK is helping you, this is what they would see, or this is what you would see. And you can choose a monograph or an edited volume, which again is really cool and allows a lot of flexibility. You see a page here with some metadata that must be entered and some initial data that must be entered. So title, abstract. You must list and put in contact information for all of the contributors, put the chapter order, choose your publication format, etc. So it's a very easy, intuitive process. You just go step by step. And here we see the publication format is in a PDF for our book, but you could use an HTML format. You could use an ebook format. These are supported as well. I believe there are some other formats supported, but these are the main ones. And we went with a PDF because of how we did the typesetting, but that's not the only way it needs to go. Now, as I mentioned, this platform allows for versioning. So when we have a new edition with totally brand new content, brand new chapters, and real major revisions to chapters, that's just going to be a new edition, and we'll publish it as if it's a separate book, right? Second edition, likely several years from now. But in the meantime, and with the authors, we decided on a date to make this feasible that would happen all at once. Let's imagine some really new important review comes out and you want to update your content, or maybe you notice a typo or an error that is very glaring and you want to correct it. You're able to do this with this platform. There's 2 options to do this, unpublishing and republishing, which is not recommended because this will give you a totally new link and that will interfere negatively with the process of digital object identifiers. I think you want to avoid that. And certainly we're going to avoid that unless something changes and makes it easier. But you could also just create a new version. And when you create a new version, people will be redirected to your updated version by default, but your previous version will be made available. And if people click on that, they will be informed that it's out of date. So it's a way of preserving the original work, but also allowing you to have updates. And you can read about versioning here as well. So that's one of the major strengths about this book, and it's the electronic format. Things are not set in stone necessarily, right? You want to have a good, high quality book to begin with, obviously, but again, there is this possibility here. With the ISBN, STORK at the moment is using Boker identifier services for the ISBN. The cover, you could, if you are skilled with graphic design and very comfortable with this, you could create your own design, or I recommend using a designer. So we went with 99designs.com about a year ago. Yeah, actually, just about a year ago. And with 99 Designs, basically you create an account and you say what you want, whether it's a poster, in this case, a book cover, could be a t-shirt, whatever type of graphic design you're interested in. And then people will compete and they'll send you draft designs and you select the one that's best, that you like best. And honestly, we put out one contest. The total cost for 99 Designs was close to $200, and we got about 60 submissions, and most of them were really good. It actually hurt to only choose just one, but we ended up choosing one. They revised the cover with a little bit more communication, and eventually they transferred the design agreement to, in this case, the editors. With license and copyright, strongly recommend using only open access figures and tables that are published under a Creative Commons license. So anytime you see a journal article that's published under a Creative Commons license, you can go and copy the figure or the table, give credit, give proper attribution, but you can use that with no issue and no fee. In the cases where you use a cover, an image or a table that's not published under a Creative Commons license, you're going to need to get a license and rights and permissions somehow. And that can be quite costly. We'll talk about those total costs as well. But by far, the biggest single cost of this book was the fees to use tables and figures, actually. And we ended up getting more than we needed. Some tables and figures did not make their way into the final version. If you want your book to look more book-like and not just words on a paper with tables and figures, you might want to use some stock images. And we went with primarily pexels.com. There's also pixabay.com, and I'm sure others, where you can get royalty-free images. And in many cases, you don't need to give attribution to the photographer or the artist, but in our case we did, and I think that's the best practice. But there are these options available. So each chapter or most chapters have pictures just to make things a little bit more visually interesting, and actually help with typesetting in some ways to make the spacing a little bit more consistent. With typesetting, we used Microsoft Word. You could use another word processor. And again, we just thought that this was the easiest at the moment for this initial book. But if you're a little bit more tech savvy, maybe you can use LaTeX or a LaTeX editor like overleaf.com, which seems to be very nice and user-friendly if you're willing to put the effort into learn that. And it can really help with consistency as well. So depending on your needs and preferences, there are multiple options. Again, we used Word and saved everything as PDFs, but that's certainly not the only option. So what were the total costs of this initial STORK book? And this might be used as a sort of guide for budgeting in the future. The cover design and stock image of the cover design was about $230. The ISBN, I believe, was about $125. The digital object identifiers are of minimal cost because STORK already has a membership through or for the journals, Communications and Kinesiology, and our other journal, which might be changing its name to Reports in Sport and Exercise. So we already have the Crossref membership, and digital object identifiers really present minimal added cost. Licenses to reuse figures and tables could become quite costly. So as I mentioned, there was a range of tables and figures that we used that we needed to pay for and get licensing for. We didn't use all of them, but the range of cost for each individual figure or table went from about $90 US dollars to close to $400 US dollars. So again, if you can avoid using them, I strongly recommend that, especially since a lot of those licenses have a limit on how many copies can be made or how many uses are valid with the license. In total, though, the cost was less than $1,000. Probably without the figures and tables, we could have kept it to under $500. So in a classroom setting where each semester I have 80 students, about 80 students who will be using this book, the previous book was about $80. So you can do the math and you can figure out that at just one campus and one semester, the book more than pays for itself. And if other people adopt it, even better. So it's very cost effective, very feasible. And again, if you're interested in this, if your colleagues are interested, please do reach out to STORK. The publications share primarily, but anyone on the executive committee will be able to help you out and help get started with this process. So that's all I have prepared. I know we have a couple people on the call, Vanessa, Emer, and Aaron, if you have anything to add or any comments.
I think you did a wonderful job presenting there. I don't have much to add because you covered a lot of it very well. Just know that, if you're watching this, we're here to support and provide as, much coverage as we can. And if you have an idea, just pitch it to us and we'll see what we can do. Vanessa has a question about format. I believe we can do more than one format. I believe you could even upload HTML, right, Zach?
You can do HTML, EPUB, which is like an ebook, PDF, and you can actually have all three formats if you wanted. And so what's really cool about that, if you do like an ebook format, you can then go to like Amazon platform or other platforms and have different methods of distribution. So using the same format for each chapter is recommended, but that's fairly easy once you have your format chosen and your typesetting process chosen. That doesn't add much additional work.
Yeah, one thing I would add there is you can use something like our Markdown where you can output all three file formats at once. And again, we may not be able to do the typesetting necessarily for you at zero cost, but we can certainly set you up and teach a way to do that. Or if you want to, offload that cost just like you did for the artwork, there are ways of doing that as well.
Emer?
Can I ask a question about more kind of the earlier stage when you were kicking off this project?
Emer, your audio is a little bit frozen. Are you able to type your question in the chat?
which, by the way, fantastic project. People that you thought content you were going to include.
Let me write in the chat.
I think her question may have been like how you organize everybody in the beginning.
Okay.
Sorry,
so,
can you hear me now?
yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, I'll try again. I'm not sure what happened there. My question was about how you organized the list of content. Did you reach out, did you come up with kind of a list of content that you'd like to include and then reach out to people? Or did you reach out to people first and ask for contributor or for suggestions, or was it a bit of both?
Great question. So we had with Leighton a discussion about chapters that we wanted to see. And then we reached out to people who in many cases we knew or had some interaction with previously, but in many cases we didn't. We just kind of knew that they were experts in their areas. But as the process went on, there were a couple instances where, of course, chapter authors made suggestions, or they preferred to take their chapter in a little bit of a different way. So we gave a general topic name basically, and trusted that the authors would make a strong initial draft and provided feedback from there. And that was very useful because initially we didn't suggest things like learning exercises or study questions at the end or throughout the chapters. And actually a few authors wrote to us and they said, oh, well, what do you think about this? And it was such a good idea that we asked everyone to do it. So they played a very active role in the process.
And Zach, in one of your slides there, you mentioned towards the end, one of the steps obtaining final approval. Did you mean by, was that like yourself and Leighton essentially made the call at the end? Okay, now this is good to go.
So with the exception of, very minor grammatical errors or issues or like a typo or something, which I know we didn't catch every single one of them. But we wanted to have final approval from the authors, right? So we didn't want, of course, you don't want to publish anything without author's consent. That's very important to obtain. So once everything was typeset and it looked like the final version, which would contain the different images and maybe some spacing would be shifted around, we sent that to the authors, and then they sent it back with their approval. So that's very important to get if you're working with an edited volume. And again, you can do that through email, which is what we did, or you can do that through the system. There are strengths and weaknesses to each approach, but both are feasible. Okay, well, I thank you for your engagement and questions, and that's all we have. So I'll stop the recording, but once again, if anyone at home is watching, please do feel free to reach out to me, Dr. Aaron Caldwell, especially our publications chair, or the executive committee. And if we don't have an immediate answer, we will certainly discuss it and work with you to build the catalog.